So I played over 40 hours of the release build of Monster Hunter Wilds, and without a doubt, this is the culmination of everything that Capcom has done for the past 20 years. Longtime fans of the series will rejoice to all the shiny new things that await inside, while newcomers will enjoy what's probably the most complete Monster Hunter game to date. So let's dive into this review. There's lots to talk about, and I will give a huge thanks to Capcom for sending me a super early review key. But we've got to start with the fact that everything in Monster Hunter Wilds seems bigger, while not forgetting about quality of life either. Focus mode alone is a complete game changer, and it feels like such a natural part of the game now that I simply can't ever imagine myself playing without it. But Capcom went a step above and gave it more than just a function. They made a whole new mechanic around it via the weakness exploiting focus strikes. Every time you pop the wounds, it feels like the perfect culmination of all your efforts during that fight, sending your foe into a world of pain and leaving them stunned for a prolonged time. And Capcom managed to integrate that organically into every toolset. If you use weapons that feature a gauge mechanic, that's a great way to fill them quicker and jump to advanced attacks. If it's a ranged weapon instead, it can give insane hyper armor and lets you autocast some of your strongest skills with way fewer penalties. And the list goes on. Others just get a massive boost in damage when popping all the wounds, which is why I've got to say it feels satisfying every single time you use it, no matter the weapon or the build. And that's before even factoring in offset attacks and power clashes. While technically only weapons that can also guard can have power clashes, it just fills that power fantasy even more, of having a massive greatsword in your hand, for example, and going toe-to-toe with the biggest, baddest monster out there after countering them with a rising slash. Quality of life also presents itself in the form of weapon swapping. You can now have a secondary weapon set, such as, for example, a ranged option like a bow. If you're going exclusively melee, can help a ton to switch things up. And quickly press right on the D-pad to switch mid-battle. You can even quick switch if you press right on the D-pad while you're not on the mount to automatically call it and then automatically switch to that weapon as you're mounted on it. Now, the game also features a story. I definitely enjoyed it a little bit more than the one in Monster Hunter World, even though there was nothing on the scale of some of the exclusive story moments that were present in Monster Hunter World. However, it compensated from other points of view. I really don't want to spoil anything, but like in Monster Hunter World, it felt adjacent to your true goal, which is monster hunting and eventually reaching high rank. Because if you just rush the main story, which you can totally do, by the way, you can actually breeze through it quite a bit, it's going to take about 15 hours, give or take, to fully finish it. That is until you reach high rank, and then there's going to be a bunch of other stuff waiting for you in there. But the story is simply there to set the stage, give you context, introduce a bunch of admittedly very likable new characters, and once it is over, it launches you straight into high rank. However, one thing to note about the main story is that it also feels very interconnected to the rest of the game. Even the characters, they don't stop being useful once you finish the main narrative. There's actually something you can do extra with them after that point. And even besides that, there are many great explanations that come from the main story of why things happen in a way they do in Monster Hunter Wilds. From the creature behaviors, from the severe storms, there's actually a good reason to follow that narrative, and I will say it also helps that characters are actually likable. Up until that point in Monster Hunter Wilds, the gameplay loop remains relatively the same as before, but with a few new upgrades, mostly reserved for high rank. So while the staple Monster Hunter formula is still here, you hunt a beast, you grab its parts, you then craft better armor and gear so that you can get ready for even stronger creatures, so that you can craft even better gear, rinse and repeat. Yes, that's still going to be there. It's the perfect loop that keeps you engaged for a very long time, and it never stops feeling satisfying. And that's also in part because of the very robust progression system with a plethora of weapons and armors that each fit a distinct role, but almost all of them seem to have a place in the game from what I've been able to tell. Hunting a boss to craft its gear just so that you can get a resistance to its biggest attacks in and of itself makes future hunts significantly more accessible, which is what makes some of these armors so desirable. While various status effects like paralysis or sleep continue to be some of the best, and you can almost stun lock targets if they are weak enough to that effect. Besides, obviously, higher defense or damage numbers, gear skills also ensure a level of strategy that you have to take into account before every fight. But high rank also introduces another level of progression and monsters that go beyond what you got used to, which is something that I don't want and can't even spoil to you for now. So for the time being, just trust me, it's going to be worth it to reach that stage in the game. We've also got to talk about how exploration has changed. The game features several maps, from the golden savanna of the Windward Plains to the lush jungles of Scarlet Forest and many other areas on top. These locales do feature an open world design as you move seamlessly through them, but each major zone is separate from other major zones. So you don't have to fast travel over there, but luckily with a good SSD, that literally takes no time. Endemic life also seems more alive than it's ever been, and that's likely because of how it's all getting affected by the dynamic weather systems and various monster interactions. The game cycles between night and day, as well as 3 different seasons on every single map, which affect a whole range of things, from the way creatures behave, spawn rates, how abundant or scarce resources get, all the way to environmental damage and much more. So while things are relatively peaceful during the plentiful season, once the inclemency settles in, things become highly unpredictable. And different maps will feature different versions of that inclemency. For example, Windward Plains has the desert thunderstorm, but the Scarlet Forest features a rainy downpour instead, and there's also going to be a blizzard in other maps, plus many other options in there. Weather systems are nothing new in video games, but Capcom somehow found a way to insert that into a gameplay loop and also make it very satisfying and rewarding, while also unpredictable. Speaking of unpredictable, let's also talk about the monsters in Monster Hunter Wilds. While many of them make a return from previous games, there's a reason, a story reason, that makes them feel more unique and brings them a fresh coat of paint. Monsters you loved or dreaded in previous games may just become that much more threatening this time around, or even upgraded with some brand new moves. As you learn attack patterns and save zones, you reach a new level of understanding and appreciation of the game's mechanics and how you can take advantage of them. Learning the move patterns of a dreadful enemy while earlier you might have struggled is definitely one of the most satisfying moments and proof that all that suffering didn't go to waste. You quickly come to realize that while gear is definitely helpful, ultimately it won't amount to much if you don't actually get good. And that's what feeds the gameplay loop so perfectly. Getting punished sucks, so once you learn your way and how the enemies move and get your attacks well timed, it all culminates in moments that are downright cinematic. Equally, the side content also becomes more relevant and more useful as you progress in the main story, to the point that eventually you will want to complete every single side objective. If it's not a new villager that unlocks new rewards, there's definitely going to be extra mechanics in there that will help you a ton. The premise is usually the same. Inevitably, you always end up with a monster hunt, which if you take down, it will complete that mission, and you can then speak to the NPC quest giver and get your rewards, which may also be one of the best ways to level up. Now, I've also got to give my praises to how well the game's been optimized, at least on the PC. I had my worries, which I did express in my initial review of the first beta a few months back, after the PlayStation 5 performance not being quite as good as I hoped. Well, let me tell you, the PC version was smooth as silk from start to finish. I didn't drop off as I moved into finishing the main story and starting high rank as it happens with other games. Admittedly, this is played on a 4090, so it's not like I'm expecting poor performance, but staying consistently into high 100, 120 FPS with everything maxed out, that is actually quite solid. There were definitely games in the past couple of years that looked way worse, but didn't come close to the level of performance of Wilds. The only issue that I can recall is, for whatever reason, I was getting these particles going haywire every now and then, sometimes ruining what could have been a great moment. But this was before the day 1 patch, so luckily whatever this visual glitch was, you can also resolve it by restarting the game. Also keep in mind that I was playing the game without the high resolution DLC, which for some reason was not available, though the in-game textures already look very good, high quality and crisp even at close-up. And on top of that, online servers weren't active during the review time either, so maybe expect a bit of a performance hit when everybody tunes in and everybody loads in on your map. We've also got to talk about the character customization. This game absolutely looks gorgeous from every point of view, from the character creator all the way to how it actually looks in cutscenes. One thing I really hate about games is when you create a very beautiful looking character only for literally every other moment you see it, besides maybe some cutscenes, he or she looks absolutely disgusting. Not in this game. Your character will look exactly how you make it look in your appearance, and you can even go ahead and further customize it at your tent for absolutely free at any given moment. Yes, even your character's voice pitch can actually be changed. Not the actual voice itself, but the pitch. If you make it deeper or a little bit higher, you can totally have that option. Similarly, I've got to love the level of customization in terms of armor. Obviously, you have different sets for different genders, but you can actually have both of them available for any character as long as you just craft them. Besides that, there's also layered armor that you unlock much further into the game. A bit too late for my liking, but it's still going to be pretty nice once you get it. A nice extra addition that you really want to have once you get to that moment. Up until then, it's still mix and matching sets every now and then. On a final note, there's a few other quality of life changes that I also want to talk about that were definitely very handy. One of them is the slinger. It just helps so much to collect everything from far away. I'm kind of feeling like Spider-Man, just zipping everything from a distance, grabbing it, crafting a batter potion, maybe a trap, or maybe like a screamer pod or anything of sorts to help me in the next fight. Similarly, you can now pause the game straight from the main menu. Very easy, and it works literally at any given moment. Fights against monsters also seem a bit quicker than what I remember in Monster Hunter World, and specifically it may be because of all the new tools and all the new upgrades we got for the weapons. Obviously there's been some major buffs to some of them as well, but in this case I think that the focus strikes really pull in ahead a ton over there with some extra damage. You also have a lot of environmental hazards that you can now use to trap enemies or damage them in real time. It also seems that conflicts between monsters happen a lot more often. Sometimes I've even seen like 3 of them at one given time just going ham at it while I was about to finish off one of them. So it can definitely turn in that way, which made some of these fights feel quicker. And I'm not complaining about that. Being able to go in, take down a mob, and then continue from that point on in the same world and maybe jumping to another one is definitely a godsend over here. I'm loving the ability to jump from monster to monster. It also helps that food buffs last for a long time, at least a half an hour depending which one you craft. And this means you can actually hunt down multiple creatures or even complete multiple expeditions if you're fast enough and still have that one single buff available to you. But you can always pop a barbecue spot and just do it in the middle of the battle if you want to. Nevertheless, maybe with a few shortcomings here and there, like for example guides and tutorials still being rather annoying and not explaining stuff enough. But besides that, this is an absolute banger of a game and an absolute must play. I would even say that this is a Game of the Year contender already, even though we barely started 2025. So a heck of a start to Monster Hunter if you're a newcomer. Definitely worth it that way. This is pretty much it with the video. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time.